Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Better Satellite World, the podcast of Space and Satellite Professionals International. I'm Lou Zaccarella. This podcast is brought to you by the generous support of Eutelsat, EchoStar Hughes, and Access Intelligence. Additional support comes from the 3,000 members of Space and Satellite Professionals International and its chapters around the world. Thank you. Well, we continue with our second season of Risk. This series is sponsored by KISPE, OneWeb Satellites, and Mansat. Today is March 8th, International Women's Day. The global theme this year is Women in Leadership. So we've brought together 4 leaders in the space and satellite community to talk about leadership and also the risk of being a woman in leadership or in a significant position. We have with us today Anita Burney. Anita leads strategy and execution at space startup KISPE Space Systems in the UK. KISPE is a specialist systems engineering and technology development company. She's a member of the board of directors of the nano satellite pioneering company Clyde Space. Anita is an honorary group captain in the Royal Air Force 601 Squadron, providing space expertise to senior personnel in the RAF. She's a regular speaker for the industry and an advocate of STEM outreach. I met Anita as Director of Exploration Missions and Spacecraft Platforms with Surrey Satellite Technology Limited. Miele is an RF hardware engineer at the Boeing company and integrated product team lead for multiple RF units. She is responsible for the design, manufacturing, and testing of space-qualified hardware ranging from non-flight research and development products to flight-ready products. She was an Industry 20 Under 35 recipient whose accomplishments include iconic engineering projects like Pacific One, which aims to provide affordable broadband communications to countries in the Pacific and Southeast Asian regions. She was a key member of the Viasat-2 payload systems engineering team, which has been equally transformative. And she is a semi-professional taiko drummer. Melissa Orlick is Director of Maritime Communications and IsoTropic Networks. Ms. Orlick is the driving force behind the converged communications provider's maritime service offering. Now in her 10th year, she is credited with helping IsoTropic Networks conquer the seas, or at least bring on more and more vessels to become an industry leader. Among her many extracurricular activities, she serves on the board of directors of the U.S. Super Yacht Association. I want to know more about those super yachts too at some point. After 14 years with satellite operator SES, where she was the senior vice president of global government, Nicole Robinson, just a few short days ago, was announced as president of Ursa Space Systems, a geospatial analytics firm based in Ithaca, New York, and one of the hottest companies in the industry. I'm proud to say that she is also the president of SSPI and was recently named chair of its Women in Space Engagement subgroup. WISE, it's called. She's done her homework on synthetic aperture radar, but there's no quiz today, and Nicole has agreed to co-host this episode of Risk with me. And again, congratulations on the new appointment, and welcome everybody to the Better Satellite World. Well, let's start, right at the heart of what we're trying to get to today. I mentioned, the risk of being a leader, the risk of being a woman in our industry. Anita, I'm going to start with you with the obvious question. What, in your view, is the primary risk and challenge of being a woman and a leader in the commercial space and satellite industry in the year 2021?
Thanks, Louie, and I'm so happy to go first because it gives me an opportunity to get my points across and share what I think on this issue, which is so important to me and of course to everyone else on the panel today. I think that the primary risk in 2021, sadly, is the same one we've been living with since I've been in the industry, and actually going further back to when I was at school and university, and it's around equality of opportunities for exposure and experience, and equality of opportunities for promotion and advancement. And I say this as someone who was able to benefit from those opportunities to get to where I am today, but Sometimes I'll look at other participants in cross-organizational meetings and I'll find myself thinking, why aren't there more people like me? How do we ensure that others have these opportunities too? And in addition to the terrible losses and health tragedies resulting from COVID, the pandemic only served to reinforce entrenched cultural and social norms, and numerous international studies have indicated that the burden of caring for children and elders in our communities has fallen disproportionately on women, and that's sadly a worldwide phenomenon. And at a macro level, the space industry as a whole seems to have shown huge resiliency in the face of the pandemic, which is absolutely to be acknowledged and celebrated, but the impact is being felt at that macro level, where I have female friends and colleagues who've really felt the strain of shouldering most of the caregiving and homeschooling demands within their families during the pandemic. And I think that the impacts of those and the risks associated with that will continue to be felt during 2021. But on the flip side, I think that there's an opportunity that presents itself, and that's that organizations have discovered what is possible and what can be achieved with the right tools and the technology, and have really accelerated their thinking on flexible working practices. And I think that these flexible working practices will endure even as restrictions start to ease, which I think is going to create even greater opportunities for female participation in the industry.
Yeah.
And the opportunity is for all of us to see how we can create a better environment than we started with.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. The aspect of COVID in many ways creating opportunities, which I think we like to talk about, but also pushing back perhaps progress is maybe one to be explored, Anita. And you know, we'll obviously have to think that through, and I'm really keen to hear more views on that. Jomya, you've picking up on that. You've been in leadership positions almost from day one, you know, as I read your career. And again, you know, they are very, very prominent and visible and key positions in these organizations. What would you say is the primary risk of being a woman and a leader in the industry?
Yeah, so I actually really liked what Anita was saying. Just to add on to that and highlighting the idea of opportunities and finding your role models, knowing what is out there. I actually went to a talk yesterday regarding a California resolution regarding Introduce a Girl to Engineering Day. This was by Assemblywoman Luz Rivas, who is also an engineer and has been pushing this resolution each year just to get motivation for girls to come into STEM. And one of her stories was her memory of someone encouraging her to study engineering in grade school. And that really resonated with me, since that was how I got into engineering as well. I liked math and science and had a vague idea of engineering, but it was really my mom who had gotten her PhD in statistics, who was the one that said, hey, you should take a look at electrical engineering. You would be a great engineer. And overall, you just never know what pieces of encouragement or what you see opening the doors to different opportunities. And this is sort of in the same way as not only hearing opportunities, but seeing opportunities. And it's often easier to see an opportunity when you're connected somehow. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we mentioned Nicole, president of Ursa Space, and like a few others like Gwen Shotwell as COO and president of SpaceX, Leanne Carrette as the president of Boeing Defense and Security. Michelle Parker at my site is the VP and chief engineer of Space and Launch. And seeing these women in these positions just shows opportunities that women can go and follow.
Yeah.
And a lot of these challenges can be overcome with networking, outreaching, and mentoring.
Yeah, certainly the networking is a very empowering thing, no matter who you are or what you do. I have to ask you, Jomya, because you said your mom was a PhD. Was it an engineering PhD or?
It was in statistics,
In
so
statistics,
more pure math based, but still in the STEM realm.
Right, but you had her as a role model. You could sort of point to her and, you know, not have sort of the hesitation that I think other women have sometimes, or people who don't have strong role models at home. Was there ever any hesitation about you when you saw an opportunity to pursue it?
So I mean, in the past, I've had some hesitation, but always thinking the worst thing that can happen is someone says no to an opportunity, right?
Right.
You just don't know what will come out of something, so you might as well try it.
Yeah, the
And
worst.
just living that way, you can just keep on moving forward.
Yeah. Well, exactly. The worst they can say is no, and that's not gonna kill you, right? It's just somebody's gonna say no, and you're gonna go to somebody who says yes eventually. Melissa, just to pick up on that, you know, again, talking about the risk of leadership, and you've been in that seat at IsoTropic Networks for 10 years, so you know you're comfortable in a leadership role. But do you still pick up that there are risks, that there are vulnerabilities, things that you can't comfortably pursue in the industry?
I don't think it's necessarily a risk as there is opportunity there. I think it's just continuing to keep taking that step forward. But I think, to Anita's point and so forth, I think with COVID, it has definitely, I think, maybe hindered some people's opportunities to keep going forward because they have had to change roles and be at home, and they may have altered the way that they were thinking of going in their career process, or, what they want to do eventually down the road. I think that's the biggest thing that I've really seen, especially within the last year, for sure.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I mean, I think not every company and organization is the same either. I think there's too much disconnect. I don't think as a whole, within the industry or any other industry, one organization could be very helpful with advancement and placement, not only of women, but any young leader or so forth in the organization. And you could go somewhere else where it's completely different. I don't think it's consistent enough.
Right. And what's the reason for that? Why is there the inconsistency? Is it just the nature of the industry, or is there something else at work?
I personally think it may be the nature of, those specific companies, maybe that they themselves haven't advanced into, new worlds and
Mhm.
new outlooks into how things are.
Yeah. I have to ask, being in the maritime space, and Isotropic Networks has really grown that side of the industry. Has this been a particularly difficult period, the last year or 18 months for you guys?
On the super yacht side, it still has remained quite active. Being on a super yacht kind of provided that safe haven for folks that own it or people that are chartering those yachts. So in a sense, it was an outlet for people to go. They didn't want
Mm.
to travel by plane to normal places that they would go to. So instead, they would go on to, a private yacht and have that experience they normally would in a safe environment through, multiple testing and so forth.
Yeah. Maybe we should send a few of those super yachts up Third Avenue where I live here in Manhattan, because nobody's going out right now. So, well, thanks, Melissa. We'll come back on these topics. Nicole, I mean, you're welcome to pick up on the question, the big question that we're asking here. But I mentioned that you helped found and now lead the Y subchapter of SSPI. What were the primary reasons that you felt, with all that you had on your plate, that the industry needed this type of community or network?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question too. So WISE, it actually stands for Women in Space Engagement. And the word engagement there was chose very specifically. We've had that question a few times to say, well, why engagement? It's an active word. It's to suggest that we wanted to generate a level of activity and involvement from the women of SSPI, to be participants in that outreach, in that mentorship, in that encouragement of one another. And maybe just to kind of tie it to your previous question as well about the primary risks and challenges in 2021 specifically, coming still through this pandemic cycle, I think burnout is a huge heightened level of risk for women in the industry.
Interesting.
It's no secret that more than 50% of the majority of working mothers are the primary caretakers in the household. That's statistically a fact. And so with that being the case, having to juggle, between Anita and I alone, we have 6 distance learners in our homes right now. Being able to balance and juggle and multitask is a unique skill set to women. And in particular, I've seen that in this industry. And so having engagement as part of that defining quality of SSPI-WISE was important. We wanted to give a platform for that opportunity to continue to lean forward, support one another, create a network to lift each other up, make aware the different opportunities that might be available, you know, and use it as an opportunity to strike that balance, leveraging one another.
Nicole, before I turn it over to you to ask questions, are you finding early on in the WISE program that is one of the primary issues that's coming up, that, you know, women in particular are burned out, and that there's these new stress levels, and that, again, there's an organization that obviously can do a little bit for it, or are there some other issues that are coming up?
I think that's definitely present. I mean, to be entirely honest, it's present in my own life. I mean, I think we are not always comfortable being honest about that. There's this feeling that, you know, we have to kind of smile and shrug it off and act like it's no big deal. Well, that's not genuine. That's not human.
Right.
And I think, you know, it's a space that we can be very candid and open and honest about it, and actually remark on how incredible it is, the things we're able to accomplish, even given the many, many things that we often are juggling. Interestingly, too, we looked recently at this Harvard Business Review report that revealed for women typically to be advancing in the workplace, they promote on the basis of performance, where by and large men promote on the basis of potential. And so this trend of having to really, continue to prove yourself over and over again, not just be acknowledged as, hey, listen, I think you might have potential. If we put you in this role, we really will see some great outcomes. It's a matter of delivering. So I think that reality has lent itself to a spirit of having to burn both ends of the candle in order to deliver what's needed. And I think given this current pandemic situation, we may be feeling that added, impact of the other elements that we're working with at home. And the nice thing about SSPI-WISE is many of us share that very same view, and have found interesting ways of working through that together, putting it to good use, and really advancing the cause for women in the industry across the board.
Yeah, and yes, we're proud of what SSPI has been able to accomplish. Thanks to to you guys and others to advance some of these opportunities. But you said something, Nicole, and that was really interesting. We did a podcast with Black executives in our industry a while back, and they said something similar. They said, I think it was Andre Jones at Kratos, who said, the challenge, of course, with us is that we have to be twice as good as everybody else to prove ourselves. So there was that pressure as well. And again, that's as you look at it, you say, well, that's an unnecessary stress to put on a talented person, but it exists. Before I turn it over to you, I'll go back to Anita. Is there anything you can do about that, or is that just going to exist for a while?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that that I'm aware of, that other underrepresented groups feel quite a lot, and it's that feeling of inclusion and feeling, going back to my original point of feeling that you have equality of opportunity and that you are being valued for your talent and also your potential, in an equitable way alongside everyone else. And I think part of it, it's partly cultural in that, and it's the same looking at it from a female perspective. I've got quite an intersectional perspective on this, but looking at it and realizing that just from a female perspective, in most of the meetings I go to, luckily not in the 3 organisations I work for, but in quite a lot of situations, I am outside the norm. And you touched upon something earlier. I think it was Nicole talking about the fact that, you know, you go into situations and there is that feeling that you have to kind of be twice as good, and that you don't really fit into the norm. And there is a lot of kind of discomfort that comes with that, of feeling like you're kind of outside the norm, and that it's harder to, you know, just generally harder to fit in. It's only through the culture of the organization and through having people around you who show willingness to elevate you, as I say, based on merit, and develop that meritocratic environment that makes you feel like you can bring your best self to work, that you feel that you're there and you can thrive. It's not just a job, it's somewhere that you can really do your best work.
Yeah. And there's a certain level of integrity that needs to go into the culture then. I mean, to kind of identify something that, you know, again, we can look at. Does that make sense, Jomya? Because when men look at women in the industry, they don't see a lot of the things that you're describing, that you're feeling, that you're experiencing. And we're just kind of looking, you know, like they're normal, but they're not.
Yeah, no, definitely everything at least being acknowledged now. So what I mean by that is you can see across the board, I mean, with the founding of SSPIYs, and many companies have BRG groups, business resource groups, to acknowledge and to talk about a lot of these unconscious biases that I think we're moving towards a more rapid change on including all the different culture and diversities. For example, the resource group I'm a part of, Boeing Women Inspiring Leadership, what we call BWIL. We're doing a whole host of events for Women's History Month to highlight a lot of different aspects, including women of color, and just elevating women and going back to finding role models and opportunities that are out there.
Mm-hmm. I should add that you're, among the other things you're doing, you're the chief of staff for the Boeing Enterprise Business Resource Group, of which I think BWIL is part of. Do I have that right?
That's correct. We actually just recently changed it to operations lead, but yeah, I just jumped on a couple weeks back, and jumping right into Women's History Month.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you just, it's amazing what you accomplish. Melissa, again, before I turn it over to Nicole, and I'm sorry, Nicole, I had to ask some of these questions. I had to ask, when we talk about culture and the integrity of culture, did you have to experience and then force some change at IsoTropic Networks? Was there a culture there that was as welcoming 10 years ago, or have you seen some evolution?
I mean, I think for us, I mean, we're a women-owned business. So we've always sort of at the forefront been looking to keep expanding on that and keep opening more doors for women within the company itself. For myself alone, starting out, I was, basically in a sales role and continued to keep growing. And I don't think for myself, it was ever anything on making a very hard point that, this is what I'm performing, etc. I think it was, I'm going to complete the task that I have a goal in mind, and I'm going to go out there and achieve it. And I don't think I let any of the other noise that, sometimes can come about get in my way of that, I guess would be the best way for me to put it.
IsoTropic Networks is a woman-owned business?
Correct.
Yeah. So given that, what is the main cultural issue that you need to deal with?
For me, almost looking outside, even to subgroups or so forth, how can we as a company attract more women? How can we participate more as a company to show women that we are women-owned? We are wanting to advance more women in this sector.
Right. So for you, the challenge is to encourage more women to come into the sector, to the company.
Correct.
So you're kind of a step ahead, it seems to me, in many ways. Nicole, I'm going to turn it over to you. You've heard some of the opening things we've been talking about here. What do you have in?
Yeah. Thank you for that, Lou. And maybe just a quick perspective there on what we've heard, and then a question for all of you as well. It appears that what comes across from each of you, just listening to you, there's this spirit of being bold and leaning forward into opportunities. That's one that it's infectious. It's one of those things that we want other women to pick up on and to be inspired by and to emulate. And I think, when Anita talked about equality in opportunity, that's particularly key. And we shouldn't ask for it. We should expect it. That it should be the way we talk about it, as though it's already here. There's this notion of almost being apologetic. We did this review. I was involved with a group called the Forum for Executive Women, and we did this review of a networking event. And interestingly, you've been to 100 of these things. You come in, there's a cocktail reception, everyone's kind of mingling and chatting. There's people you don't know, people you do. And when the men are introducing themselves, they'll say, listen, I'm Robert Smith. I'm vice president of engineering at XX firm. You get the full title, the full name, everything. And when women, many cases at this networking event, were introducing themselves, they'd extend their hand, say, hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm with XX firm, and not fully say, listen, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is why it's important. So I think this notion of showing up, be counted, be confident and bold in your position. I think that's a really important thing. And what I'd love to get a sense of from the women here, given your career path that you've been on and the different challenges you've had to navigate, maybe an example from you on how you have been bold. How have you leaned in to accept a new task, a new project, or a new challenge, and what that might have done for your journey? Maybe Anita, if you want to share first.
Thank you. And that's such a fantastic question. And I'm sure that both Jomya and Melissa and yourself, Nicole, will probably identify quite well with this, in that, we're in this really vibrant, growing industry, and not only are no 2 days the same, but no 2 projects are ever the same, and there's always something new happening. And I feel that there have just been so many opportunities for development, not just from a personal perspective, but from a technology perspective. There's always something new to do. And so, like Jomya was saying, it just never say no, just keep asking. If the opportunity is there, sometimes, and I think it was maybe Richard Branson who said, if you're offered a seat on a rocket ship, don't ask which seat, just get on. And so everything that's been offered to me, I've always said yes. And that's partly because of knowledge that I have the capability, but also because I want to be part of that growth story. I want to be part of an exciting journey, and I want to be able to grow my portfolio of skills and capabilities. And so, to be honest, it's really hard to pick just one. I just feel like my entire career journey has been a series of stepping stones of being offered opportunities, probably because people have recognized my potential and have liked the work I've done so far. But being willing to step up and give it a go and do the very best I can every time, and show that the decision was worthwhile for them to take, to offer me the opportunity, but also worthwhile for me as well. So Nicole, I don't have one specific example, I just look back at my career and I can just see so many opportunities or so many examples and scenarios where someone has asked me to do something and I've thought, I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to learn on the way. And it doesn't matter if it's learning curve, I know I'm perfectly capable and up for the challenge.
And stepping outside of your comfort zone sometimes too, I'm sure, in order to pick up that new challenge. Is that something you've seen as well, Jomya?
Yeah, totally. So, I resonate with what Anita was saying about having lots of opportunities come up, but I think the one I can think of the most was a couple years back when I was still working GCSAT 18 Pacific 1. At this point, we were in the manufacturing phase, so there's a little bit more time. And one day I got a call from our VP of Government Satellite Systems, Troy Dawson. And he was just like, hey, I'm looking for a chief of staff. Are you interested in coming in helping out? And so my background is engineering, right? So it it was a lot. It was a different idea to step into the program management side of things, getting opportunity to see how the business is being run and the different portfolios compared to what I was doing as an engineer. But uh, I guess what I'm trying to say is at that point I was thinking about it. I'm like, this is a really good opportunity. It's a chance to learn something new outside the scope. Uh, but it is really different from what I have been doing. As I mentioned before, it's always good to accept and just say yes, try it out. I was a little bit hesitant because of workload and trying to understand how much bandwidth I would need in order uh, to really work the opportunity. Um, but overall, I just went with it, and it was a really good experience. Really learning the whole business side of things and how it plays along with the engineering side.
Yeah, and what a great example of things may not be exactly um, what you had done in the past, and it's a matter of saying, do I understand 100% of every aspect of this new challenge? No, but I'm willing to step forward into it, put my own fingerprints on it, learn a lot. If I fail, I'm going to fail quickly and figure out how to make the most of this opportunity. I think that's a really powerful example. Melissa, in your journey as well, I'm sure over the past 10 years with IsoTropics, you've had many different opportunities to kind of put your hand up and be counted and take on new assignments, new areas of responsibility. Would love to hear your views on this as well.
Definitely. And even before I was at IsoTropic, I came from the financial world, where obviously we know is another male dominated area. I was very blessed. So at the time, I got onto a team of majority of women, and they were all very strong. And they pretty much gave the don't settle for anything. If you want something, go for it. If you're not liking what's happening, address it and sort of set that foundation for yourself. So from there, when I joined IsoTropic, I was in this role where we're in sales. These are the markets that we're in. Where do you want to find yourself? And I ended up looking to an area where we were dabbling in yachting at the time, but we weren't doing much. And I said, well, why isn't anyone doing anything in this section? And there wasn't really anything back. And I said, well, I'm going to take this, I'm going to make it mine. And I see an opportunity here. So let's grow it and do it. And I think that's where I saw is, where can I succeed the best and help not only myself, but the company as well.
Yeah, and I think if you all would grant me the permission to ask you one more question. I know we're getting towards the end here, but just hearing from you, it's clear if this is an impression and an example that we're able to instill in the community and remind ourselves that others are watching. Our kids walking past the room, they're watching, they're hearing you. They're the folks that listen to this podcast or see your updates on LinkedIn. They're watching and listening. And so what you say and how you conduct yourself, an example that you leave, makes a difference. And so I'm curious, if you flash forward 5 or 7 years, what might this industry's landscape look like when it comes to women? Perhaps Jomya, do you want to begin?
Sure. So 5 to 7 years from now, my hope is that it'll feel like the norm to see women in the various roles. We've already talked about how Melissa's company is women run, but another example is when I was lead payload engineer on JCSat 18 Pacific 1, I was actually one of at least 10 leads on the program who was a woman. our payload lead, our TNCRF, survivability, dynamics, mass lead, command and data handling, blankets, decalibration, STI hardware, integration, and vehicle engineering lead. We were all women. And it just happened that the program happened to have 50% women leaders. Listening to this, I think a lot of people might think, hey, that's impressive and a bit of an anomaly. And in today's world, that's probably true. It might seem like an odd concept or a impressive impressive program staffing perspective, but given that the population of women in the US is about 50%, this should be the norm. It should feel like it's correct. It shouldn't feel like it's anything impressive. So I'm hoping with the acceleration that we will get to there.
Yeah, we go from the goal to the norm. That's great. Melissa, how about for you? 5 to 7 years down the road, what does it look like for women?
I think it's quite bright. I mean, if we just even look at last year's, SSPI's 20 under 35, if I'm not mistaken, all four of the Promise Award recipient nominees were all women.
That's
I
right.
I think right there alone, I think we've got very brilliant women that are out there, and I think we're going to see it prosper very well.
I think you're right, especially if this group of women have anything to do with it. And Anita, maybe bring us home. What's your view for the next 5 to 7 years?
Well, I have to agree with Melissa. I mean, there have been so many changes across the industry in terms of supply and demand of technologies and capabilities. And I am optimistic about the future, because if the response to the pandemic has taught us anything, it's that change can come about really, really quickly if we're all motivated to do something about it. And something that Lou said kind of resonated and stuck in my mind. He was asking about, what is it that men should be doing? Are we not aware? And I think that it's partly not that others, who are most represented don't care. It is that awareness thing. And, if you only have men in your team, you are missing out on the perspectives and the inputs of half the population, statistically, of course. And I don't know if you know the book Invisible Women, written by Caroline Criado Perez. It's absolutely fantastic, and I recommend that everyone reads it. But yeah, I totally agree, and hope that in 5 to 7 years' time that there will be more representation of women. And when I look that far ahead, people, young women who are currently 14 years of age, working backwards. So kind of around the age of my youngest daughter, they could be graduating with an aerospace engineering degree or a science or a maths degree. And I really want to be part of the community that acts today to help those young women, those girls, to feel excited by STEM today, and that they're encouraged by their educators and their families. And Jomya's story about being encouraged by her mother to take up engineering, that's such an amazing story, because a lot of young girls, they just don't have that as a role model. And that's what I hope that all of us can be, promoters and speak highly of the industry and talk about how exciting and creative it is. I mean, people think that it's dry and stuffy and it's just all about numbers, but it's super creative, solving problems every day. And so that's what I want to be able to bring to the industry, the sense of excitement. And I hope that the young girls and women who might be listening to this podcast today on International Women's Day will feel excited about it being a prospective
Beautifully said.
Career opportunity for them.
Absolutely beautifully said. And I think, as we get to, even 10, 15 years down the road, hopefully we look back as when we do the International Women's Day celebration, and we look back and we think the opposite of gender parity is just as ridiculous in STEM fields as it was that women couldn't vote not too long ago. So we hope that's a culture that they embrace in the future. And this is not an anomaly, but something that's standard. It's commonplace, and we achieve that balance as well. Lou, thank you so much for bringing all of us together. Let me leave it with you then, and certainly thank Melissa, Jomya, Anita for such an engaging discussion. Happy International Women's Day to each of you, and thank you for all of your contributions.
Thank you, Nicole, for for that. And Anita, thank you also for just noting the theme of this show, which is the better satellite world. We think that we are in a creative industry and that we are making the world better. And this is hopefully another way that we do that. And it is a great industry to work in. And that's one of the reasons we do this, to try to draw everybody to it. Just very quickly, Nicole, I'm going to ask you a quick one. Then I'm going to get up. We're going to get out of here. I'm going to circle all the way back because the title of this series is Risk. Do you have any concerns about going backwards? Is there something that might keep you up that we should be mindful of?
I think we have a responsibility to acknowledge when we do see blips. And we talked about the prospect of burnout given the pandemic as a backdrop.
Mm-hmm.
And I think failure to address that situation is something we can't tolerate. I think if we see it, we have to address it. We need to link arms together, work on it, support one another, and find a way to come out the other side of this without losing ground for how far that we have come. So yeah, I do think that there's a risk, but I also think there's a responsibility. And the women that are on this call here, certainly the women in SSPI WISE and elsewhere in the industry, these are just the sort of individuals who can help mitigate that risk and see us through it to a much stronger future than what we have now.
Yeah, well said. Just to call it out when you see it. But that concludes my conversation with Anita Burney, Miele, Melissa Orlick, and Nicole Robinson. Thanks again to each of you for coming by to do this. Hopefully we can do it again. For more information on these companies, contact SSPI and we'll tell you all about them. Thanks again to Kymeta, Mansat, and OneWeb Satellites, our sponsors for this special series. Please thank them by doing business with them whenever and wherever you can. The Better Satellite World podcast is brought to you by SSPI and its corporate partners, EchoStar Hughes, Eutelsat, and Access Intelligence. Learn more about the Better Satellite World series at sspi.org and contact Tamara Bond-Williams if you want to sponsor an episode or an upcoming series called Space for All. If you want to become a member of SSPI, again, go to sspi.org. If you're a student, your membership is free. To use this content for your classroom, social media, or a presentation, visit bettersatelliteworld.com and check out the videos. And please follow us on Twitter at SSPI and check us out on LinkedIn and Facebook. Keep checking sspi.org for information about our March 22nd and 23rd Hall of Fame induction ceremony activities. You won't want to miss this year's induction. For Space and Satellite Professionals International, Ursa Space's Nicole Robinson, and our producer, Ana Gomez, I'm Lou Zaccarella. Let's make it a better satellite world. Take care, everybody.